Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests, well, first of all, you should recognize our guest. We have Theresa back on the podcast. We are literally talking to her a day over a year since the last time that we had her on. It's January 3rd, now that we're recording this, and it was January 2nd last time we had her on. And if you haven't watched the first one, she's an IFBB bikini pro. She's competed in 3 different shows that since we last talked, and we're going to talk to her a little bit about that, as well as, talk about how her climate is so much better than my climate in Minnesota right now and how it's going to, depress everyone that's living in a colder climate. But most importantly, Theresa, thank you so much for coming back on.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So let's just start off right off the bat with you making everyone in the North feel bad. What is the weather like in Tampa right now?
Right now it's pretty nice. It's like 85 degrees, sunny. I was thinking about going to lay out by the pool. But it gets stormy and cloudy here every now and then, but then it warms right back up.
I feel so bad for you when that cold front comes on. Really, I do. I mean, just interrupting your perfect Tampa weather. I mean, no, but yeah, anyone here, that's living in the Midwest, we know what the weather's like right now, so I'm not even going to bring it up. But why don't you give us a little bit of an update on what you've been up to ever since we last talked to you a year ago? I mean, I know you competed in 3 different shows. How did those go?
Yeah, so this was like my first full year as a pro. So because I was teaching, so I was a first grade teacher. It was really hard for me to do a bunch of traveling. So I picked a lot of local shows, and then I picked one show that I wanted to go travel to, which was Iron Games. So the first show was Tampa Pro, and the second one was Hurricane. So they're both here in Tampa and Clearwater, and it went okay, but it's definitely a competitive world out there. So I got 4th call outs in both. And then when I went to the Iron Games, it ended up being the biggest show of the year. There was over 50 pro bikini competitors, and I ended up getting 2nd call out. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to end my season on that note and then just go right into my improvement season.
Well, and plus, like we were talking about before we started recording, you get to enjoy the holiday food then, and that's really a big important thing, especially for someone like me. But just being the first year that you were a pro, what would you say was probably the biggest shock that you had about competing at the pro level as opposed to being an amateur?
Yeah, it's just such a different world, right? You come in as a rookie, and you start from the ground up again. It's like you have to rebuild yourself up, and you're going up against everyone who just looks amazing, and there's really no fault. It's a very subjective, competitive sport. But I think one of the things that is just very eye-opening is that it just takes time to build that mature muscle and to get confident on the stage and get to a lean enough body composition and to get at that really competitive top level where you're winning these pro shows it takes time.
Buyer beware when you get into bodybuilding, because everyone in our generation, they want everything now and they want it yesterday, and they're not willing to put in the hard work most of the time. So, and this is definitely a sport where, as you get older, it's one of those rare sports where as you get older, you tend to get better. Almost every other sport as you get older, it doesn't end up so well. But that's why I always say, if you see an especially really young person who's really just, really killing it, you always just think of the potential that they have years down the road. When it comes also to your pro training, did you mix up your training at all just to get ready for these shows, knowing that you were going to have to put on maybe a little bit more muscle, or you were going to maybe have to come a little bit more shredded and a little bit more leaned out?
Yeah, the goal for my body type is always to add a little bit more muscle, and again, that just takes time. And I think one of my bigger challenges now is actually getting to that elite amount of body fat. It's like that last 1% that you need to come down to, and that's like the hardest to get off because your body is just in this mode of like, nope, survival mode. We're not going to take you past this 1%. So I do feel like I get better each prep, and each prep I do get a little bit leaner, but still I think that's going to be one of my goals, is really focusing on the conditioning aspect.
Just those last few days, people don't realize how important they are, especially when it comes to, if you're doing water depletion, which a lot of my guests do, or just trying to get that body to look that, just like you said, just because so many of these shows, everyone looks so amazing, especially at the pro level, that it's really the most minuscule things that separate people apart, which is, again, that just the the headspace that needs to have in your brain just to allow for the fact that, one minor mishap can really cost you so much at that level. It's just, I mean, just that focus and that determination that the competitors have truly is amazing. But did you change things up at all nutrition wise?
So my method of nutrition is basically flexible dieting and manipulating my macros. And it's not just, eating whatever I want. Obviously, my calories get lower because at the end of the day, it does come down to being in an energetic deficit or a caloric deficit. And, your body just adapts. So what I started my prep off is not what I'm going to finish my prep off with. So I had to continue to taper down my macros, increasing cardio. So my method of dieting stayed the same. But I think training wise, really focusing on those compound lifts, building that muscle, staying that to lift heavy. It's almost like you're so fatigued from the dieting that when you go to train, you have to push yourself to keep lifting heavy because you're so fatigued that it's really difficult to keep your strength up, but you have to because your muscle, you just have to demand it out of your muscle so you don't start to lose that muscle mass.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just gonna pretend that I've never heard about flexible dieting before because there might be like that one viewer out there who doesn't know what it is. Could you just briefly explain to us what flexible dieting is?
Flexible dieting is basically a method of dieting where you are focusing on your macronutrient intake, your protein, your carbs, and your fats. And depending on what your goal is, if it's to gain mass or to decrease in a fat loss phase, you're going to manipulate your macros based on that. Basically, what it comes down to.
No, and that's about the best way that I've heard it explained so far on this podcast. And if anyone else is more interested about that, definitely look it up because there are just so many ways that people have their diets or people eat, and it's like one of the big themes that I like to preach on this podcast is that everyone's different. You're always kind of concocting your own potion like a mad scientist to sort of figure out what works best for you. But yeah, flexible dieting is definitely one thing that a lot of people that I've had on really have a lot of success with. But this is a question that I wasn't even preparing to ask you, but then you said that you're a first grade teacher, and I have a lot of friends that are also in the young adult, or I mean the kid teaching, basically elementary school teaching, I should say, actually, that they have a big problem when it comes to getting sick because a lot of these kids, they bring illnesses to class, and then just when you're dealing with a lot of younger kids, it's a lot easier to get sick. But when you're getting ready for a bodybuilding show, your immune system's already going to be down as is, being that you're already all dieted down. Do you have to be just super careful then when you're teaching that you don't pick up any accidental, like an accidental cold or an accidental flu from any of the kids?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I got hammered with sicknesses. You're so prone, again, you're so fatigued and your micronutrient intake, you try to stay up on top of it, but you're just not getting the same nutrients that you are when you're in an energetic or caloric surplus. So, yeah, I definitely was always getting sick. But yeah, I actually just finished up teaching. So I taught first grade for about 6 years, and I just made the transition to full-time coaching now.
That's well. I was gonna say, believe me, I was one of those kids that would make your life not that great when I was in first grade. So coming from someone who used to be like that, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. But yeah, and that's so awesome. And how long did it take you to fully make that transition? When did you really start saying that hey, this might be something that I actually want to do full time?
Um, I kind of always knew, like once I started getting really involved in competing and I started seeing a little bit of success and I started just falling in love with my transformation, I knew that I wanted to help other people too. So I started pulling clients here and there, what I could do while I was teaching. And, my coach is Lane Norton, and he actually pulled me onto his team. So I'm really excited to be a part of the BioLean team. So that's really exciting.
Well, and I was gonna wait until the end to do this, but yeah, if anyone's interested, I'll leave a link to all of her stuff down below, and BioLean if you want to look into that. I'm more than happy to do that, just because anything that I can do to help out the guest or help people get in shape, first of all. But I mean, being that you are in such great weather, one thing that I find is a fun question to ask because being that, me being up here where it's cold all the time, I'm going to be in a sweater 99% of the time. So really, it doesn't matter what I look like on the outside for about 4 or 5 months out of the year. But being that you are in a climate that is going to be, now I know you're going to say it's going to be like cold if it's like 60 degrees, but it's going to be warm by my standards year round. Do you ever feel that extra added pressure to look great year round as opposed to maybe if you were living in a colder climate where you could kind of hide it a little bit?
That's a good question. Even I would say in the winter states, because it's not you by your definition cold, it can get chilly at times. So you are, I feel like, wearing, more light sweaters and sweatpants. I actually just look forward to the season. I actually wish Florida had more season change. I wish, the leaves turned colors and it got a little bit colder. So I don't feel that pressure, but I think that more so if you're talking about being in season versus out of season. Like when you go into your improvement season, I think there is this mental switch that has to happen. Like most people don't look like this, it's not realistic. So you have to fall in love with that process, like being super motivated to add that lean muscle tissue and put on a little bit of minimal body fat in the process. But yeah, of course, we all wish that we could stay as stage ready as possible, but it just doesn't happen. And I like to schedule mine around the holidays so that I can enjoy all those treats and desserts.
Well, and like I probably said on our last podcast, and I say in every podcast, it's just like starting your own business though too, where you got to put on weight if you got to put on muscle, and you got to spend money if you want to make money. I mean, those two just go hand in hand. And believe me, if there was any other way, I would endorse that. But that's definitely just how it goes. And first of all, I mean, like you were talking about, everyone likes to eat. You got to give yourself breaks every once in a while. If you're just, I've had these people, I've had a handful of them that come on that they're the ones that try to stay lean, year round. And I mean, some of them, they're able to maintain it for just a little while, but it does end up damaging you because your body is just not meant to be that lean for that long of a time.
It's not very sustainable for the long term. And I mean, the metabolic damage that can happen when you put your body under that stress for a long period of time can really affect you in the long term. That's for sure.
I've definitely looked up, those some stories that I've heard where, just that damage alone is just one of the things that I really would like to point out to anyone who's maybe thinking about doing that. But yeah, I mean, it's just with anything in any sport, people try to do things different ways. But one thing that I love to ask, especially female competitors that I have on my podcast, because for the male competitors, it's a little bit different, but it really seems that for the females is such a tight knit community where everyone really seems to care about each other. I mean, even if you look on Instagram and there's all these posts, you see all these other competitors commenting like, wow, you look amazing. You're going to do great. It seems like backstage, a lot of them get along and it's just a camaraderie feeling. And I kind of chalk it up to myself, not that I've had any experience with that, kind of like the joint suffering where, because you guys have gone through so much with your preps, you guys kind of understand what you guys have went through. But how important is that to know that you do have competitors that really generally do care about you, and really you guys can be just a tight-knit community?
Yeah, and I think that goes along with one of the big epiphanies or aha moments I've had coming into a lot of these pro shows this year is like, you know, it kind of helps take away from the stress of getting on stage is, making friends backstage, and it's a lot of fun, and you feel so isolated through your prep journey, and then you come into a show and it brings all of these people together who share the same lingo, the same passions, and it's cool. It's cool to see people come from all over the world and we all meet up and share some of those things that we have in common.
Well, and you also, like you said, you meet people from all over the planet. I mean, I had a guest on yesterday from New Zealand, and first of all, she wrapped up my English trifecta. I was trying to get someone on from every English-speaking country on the planet, and she was the last one. And her accent, I could barely understand her half the time, but she was great to have on. But yeah, I mean, you just don't know ahead of time the type of people that you're going to meet and just how it really does connect everyone. But when you are backstage, a lot of people have that special treat that they have that maybe they have a little sugar that makes their veins maybe pop out or really, helps them. What do you like to use?
Ooh, so one of the things I normally have, besides like rice cakes, is actually Reese cups. Um, it's like that last piece of simple sugar that kind of gets that pump going, but also the sodium that is in the Reese peanut butter cup. It helps pump your muscles before you go on stage. So that's usually my go-to. Pop a Reese cup right in my mouth.
Well, and the hard thing too that most people don't realize is that you have to eat it at like a specific amount of time too. You can't just, let's say you have it like the day before, that might not work as best, but it's everything is just so scientific when it comes to walking on that stage. But since we last talked last year, what do you think is one body part that you've improved on the most since we last talked?
Let's see. Last time, I'm trying to think what I said last time about my goal has always been just to be full in my overall musculature. And I think that I have mastered that, but it's like a continual process. So I think my lower body, just gaining a little bit more lower body muscle mass, um, is still a goal of mine. Um, my upper body is usually not the problem.
I've seen her post on upper body. Everyone, she's telling the truth on that one at least. But the one thing that I enjoyed some of your posts though is that like there's always been this misconception that is really stupid, that a lot of times people don't think that bikini girls don't work out as hard as maybe like figure girls or physique girls. If you look at some of your workouts on Instagram, I mean, you're just repping out pull ups. You're really just killing it. So I've actually pointed to a few people. It's like, look at her profile if you really think that that's not true. So that's awesome that you're doing that. But another big misconception though about the bodybuilding sport is that I've had so many people come on that don't understand that you guys are not powerlifters. You're not going to be putting up, like 400-pound bench presses or doing like 500-pound squats. A lot of people have that misconception in their head where just big muscles equals immensely strong. Now, granted, bodybuilders are very, very strong, but they're not going to be doing that. Do you find that sometimes, even though just mentally, just knowing that you do look very big and very strong, that you're not going to, hey, maybe I shouldn't go up and try to just max out all the time?
Yeah, and I think that your strength actually goes down a bit, and you're doing more hypertrophy work. But you have to be careful too, because you're also prone to injury. So if you do try to, keep the same weight that you were pushing for those 1 rep maxes, or you could hurt yourself. And that's actually happened to me. I've had to take a step back because I tweaked something because I just went a little bit too heavy and like my body was too fatigued. But even in the off season, like of course it's your goal. You want to focus on strength and also incorporating a lot of volume work. But you know, I would say the misconception is that we don't do powerlifting exercises, and I think that you can. We definitely want to incorporate those compound movements, especially if you're someone like me who needs to really put on some muscle mass. Um, but we're probably not going to the extreme of competing with it.
No, and I totally agree with that. But one of the training techniques that I've used ever since I really got started when I was 18, and so many people come on the podcast and they just live by it, is time under tension. Do you use a lot of time under tension in your training?
Yeah, and one thing I incorporated this year, which was new, was some blood flow restriction. And that I feel really contributed to the time under tension because I used it around my biceps, and my biceps burned so hard, and it didn't take very long because it really concentrates it. It traps that muscle under, or that blood under the muscle. So I was getting pumps, and I was only doing, half the reps that I would normally do. So definitely, that's absolutely an effective way.
Yeah, blood flow restriction. That's one thing that I wasn't really aware of until I started this podcast, but a lot of people use that as well. But this is a question that I asked you on the last podcast, but now that you've become a full-time coach, it's going to be even a more important question, because out of all the myths and stereotypes that I love to bust on this podcast, the number one, I mean, it's gotten better, but there's still so many women that have that fear where if they walk into the gym and they pick up one dumbbell, they're going to just hulk out and put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And, like I always say to that, if that ever happened to you, I would spend my entire life savings just to talk to you for 5 minutes, because you have found the secret that me and, a vast majority of people on the planet are looking for. You'd probably get kidnapped by the government because they would want to like spread your genetics to everyone, but it's just so not true. But how do you deal with that now? Because I bet being a coach, you hear that a lot more than you even heard before. How do you like to respond to that if people come up and have that concern?
Yeah, that's going to be a continual misconception, just because it's like people just don't know because they've never done it before. But I remember when I first started getting into competing, and I would have friends tell me and warn me, "Oh, be careful. Please don't turn into one of those big bulky bodybuilders." They were scared, and I'm like, I don't think that's possible. I work so hard and I train so heavy, and uh and I still just don't look like, a man. I don't know. It depends on your body type. You pick the division that's best for your body type. I could do the same workouts as, a figure competitor and I'd still look like me.
Guys, and if you have any concern about that, look at her Instagram. She looks like a supermodel basically in most of those posts. It's like, does she really? Does that is that what if that's what a man looks like these days? That's I don't know what's gone wrong with this world, but I mean, it's just so not true. And that's why I love asking that question, because we've had guests that have been doing this sport for 30, 40 years, and it's just like they don't look anything like that. And a lot of it too is just drug use and stuff that people don't understand, that that's the only way that you're ever going to look anything like a shred of a man. But I just don't. I mean, if I could just shake every person that had that thought and just be like, you don't, that's not the truth. It's not, I really, really would. But it's
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, all the misconceptions. I mean, I cannot imagine how many people have been turned off by the gym just by that fear alone, that would have really, really benefited from that. But being someone like me who is not the biggest fan of cardio, I mean, my cardio during the winter is just ice skating basically when I'm not working out. What is your relationship with cardio like?
You know, when you're in season, you're just in that grind mode. Once you plug in, you're just like, okay, it's got to get done. You don't think about doing it. You're like, I just have to do it. Um, so that's always a pain, but it's kind of part of the process. But I think once you get to the point where you're kind of still under fueling due to your calorie restriction, plus the added cardio that kind of increases the more body fat you're trying to get rid of, it definitely it stresses the body. You're exhausted. So when you get to that point, you're kind of like, I don't think I want to do cardio right now.
I mean, I'll be at like 12% body fat myself, and doing cardio is just a pain that I can't even imagine what that's like when you're so lean down for a show. I mean, I just, ugh, just that thought alone. But another question, that since you mentioned that you were a teacher, and we had talked about in the last podcast, because I rewatched it last night before I had you come back on now, is we talked about the importance of sleep and how, especially with bodybuilding, sleep becomes even more important than the average person because it's with recovery. Have you enjoyed the adjustment to your sleep schedule, knowing that now, being as a coach, you might not, I hope you're not getting up as early as you got up for when you were teaching kids?
No, it's been really nice. And one of the things that's also nice, just being in my off season in general, is that your recovery is better, because you are getting in adequate amount of calories. I remember in my prep, I got to a point where I couldn't even fall. It was really hard for me to fall asleep and stay asleep because, you either go to bed hungry, and your mind is just thinking about one thing, which is food.
Or you get like an hour of sleep too, and you wake up even hungrier after that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, and I would always try to go to bed super early. So I would literally teach all day, come home, go to the gym, come back, have my dinner, have my shake, take a melatonin, and try to go to sleep super early and just stay out of the kitchen, just lock myself in the bedroom.
I have to say, melatonin has been an absolute game changer for me. I didn't start taking it until about 3 months ago, because I used to have a job where I worked nights. So just getting myself readjusted to a somewhat normal sleep schedule, yeah, that was definitely a game changer for me. It's just incredible. But going back to that myth that we were talking about women are afraid that they're going to get too big. The one positive thing that I think really impacts women so much more than men when it comes to working out is that confidence boost. I mean, we've heard so many stories on this podcast of women who have, made life-changing decisions that just help boost their mood. It's made them more assertive. It just really helped them better themselves. And I always say that is the one thing that you can take from the gym and impact every single aspect of your life, is just that confidence boost. How have you used that confidence boost that working out has given you, and use that to impact your life in a positive way?
Yeah, I think that's a huge one, and not I think most women, like, of course, when you're working out and you see those physical results, it goes hand in hand with the physical transformation, but I think it's the mental transformation, and what it does to you mentally, that really boosted my confidence. I don't know if it's just having to show up to the gym every day, keeping promises to yourself, um, seeing the changes with your physical eyes and saying, I did that. I put in that work. Nobody can take that away from me. Um, I think that's my favorite part about the entire process. And it's boosted my confidence in the fact that it's made me feel more stronger and powerful, just following through with my action plan and then seeing the results. I mean, that's crazy powerful.
And well, I always can't. Well, I could imagine maybe when you're done with, especially a show, do you have that sense that like you can literally accomplish anything? Because if you've been through such a bad thing, or not a bad thing, but such a sort of hellish thing that is prep, and you get through that, and you're able to see that you're able to accomplish that, do you really feel like you can do anything then?
Yeah, you just get stronger every prep. And every prep you go through, you're going to have challenges and you're going to hit that point where you have like a breakdown. It just happens every time. But you get through it and you're like, wow, I've gone through all of that. What else can I not get through? You know? So it definitely gives you an incentive to push.
We have heard plenty of stories about like people crying on treadmills while they're still running on them, and just yeah, and just that mental, yeah, that I mean, that would probably be me. I mean, just the mental fortitude that takes to compete in this sport really is. I mean, because I say it all the time, it's so much more of a mental sport than it is a physical sport. For all the times that people think who aren't really that invested into the sport, they don't realize that, you can convince your body to work out. The mental aspect of it though is about 100 times as hard as anything. But when it came down to posing in bikini shows, especially for pro shows, did you change up your posing routine at all?
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that just gets better with time is you will learn your body's angles. You learn how to hold your body. I think everyone when they start competing, they go through the phase where they're just kind of awkward with their body because you're not used to seeing yourself in that way. And I think the leaner you get, the more lines that come out in your body, and that will affect how you want to pose. And I know, especially with bikini, you can choose whatever front pose you want to, but it seems that there is like a trend of a front pose that is changing. So you want to keep in touch with the trends, but also know what works for your body as well. So yeah, posing has changed tremendously.
What is that feeling like for you when you get to walk up on stage and show off all of that hard work that you've worked months upon months on? What's going through your mind when you're finally, all of that work that you've put in is finally time to show it off?
It you know what? It feels good. I think as a pro, once I break in a little bit more, I think my confidence will build and I will sink into that feeling a little bit more. Um, yeah. Yeah, it's all about timing. It's all about the time that you put in and feeling ripe, if that makes sense. Like I think I've made a ton of progress, but I think I still haven't reached my peak ripeness. So I have that to look forward to. And I think that when I reach that peak, that's when I'm going to walk on stage and be like, okay, I feel confident, I feel ready.
Well, I think you also have a really good background for the sport too, being that, I mean, if anyone doesn't know, you were an NFL cheerleader. And I mean, if you're cheering in front of 80,000 people, I think that really might help a little bit with your confidence when you're walking on stage in front of a couple hundred to a couple thousand people. Do you really think that that background helped you at least a little bit confidence wise that you're able to walk up on that stage?
Yeah, yeah. I think it definitely prepared me in a sense of when you're up on stage or when you have all these people looking at you. And I think just the comfortability factor of having already have done that, it wasn't as such a shock to me when I did it through competing.
What was your experience like with those high heels that they make you wear though? Because for a lot of people, that is the biggest detriment to them.
It definitely takes some getting used to, especially if you are awkward in general holding your body, which most people are. I feel like I was at the beginning. Um,
I'm 6'3", so I know what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah, they're not comfortable, but you definitely got to practice because it does change your hips. It changes your your whole torso and how you can show that off.
One thing that the general public doesn't think about when they think about posing too is the smiling aspect. I mean, you have to have that smile on for the entire time because we've had guests that have come on who have, let that smile down for maybe 10, 15 seconds while they're transitioning or while something else is happening or while they're just in call outs and they're just waiting and they've gotten points docked off for that. I mean, I always say your jaw muscles must be the hardest thing. They're the most sore thing afterward, just because of that, maintaining that smile. Do you just have to practice that a lot too? Just realizing that, hey, I might be on this stage for quite a long amount of time, and I still gotta, pretend like everything's great and stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is, when you go up there for bikini, you don't realize how long you could be up there for. Because you might go do your routine or you might go do comparisons, but then they'll line you back up on the sides while they're pulling other girls to the center. And one thing they always reiterate is we can still see you even if you're standing on the sidelines. So holding your still holding your poses and of course smiling. But yeah, you're not off the hook just yet. So you could be up there the whole entire show and your body hurts, your back hurts, but you just got to keep holding it.
Yeah, I mean, we had a 50-year-old on, and she was a figure competitor, and she was out there for 45 minutes, and she was just like, "Just give me a chair or something to sit in while I'm waiting for everyone else." But being that you are a bikini competitor, the one thing that really I think differentiates bikini from all the other divisions is that you have to have sort of like your own sass, your own like flavor when you're on that stage. Were you someone that was just born naturally with that, or did you really have to discover it throughout your prep?
I think I had to discover it. Yeah, I would say that has been kind of like a huge, I wouldn't say it came naturally to me. I had to kind of break out of my shell a little bit. Even with the modeling, the fitness modeling, the swimsuit modeling, I think a lot of people think that that comes naturally to me. I just did these photo shoots because I needed to get used to that. I needed to get used to being comfortable with that because the truth was I was not comfortable doing any of those photo shoots or even being in front of a camera. You definitely have to practice.
Oh, believe me, I'm gonna admit this to everyone on the podcast. Before I started this podcast, I did about like 3 trial things where I literally just recorded myself talking, then rewatched it, and then I was like, okay, this is what I need to work on before I actually start publishing these or doing any of these. So yeah, you definitely, just like anything else in life, you definitely just need to practice. I mean, well, practice does. I mean, it doesn't make perfect, but it makes you a heck of a lot better. But if we were to talk to you again a year from today, I mean, where would you like to be at in your life? What are some goals that you would like to have achieved if we were to talk again a year from today?
A year from today, if we're talking specifically competing, I really want to get that Olympia qualification. I think I plan to take a good amount of time in my off season to really repair my metabolism so that when I do diet down, it's in the most optimal place it can be. Um, and then doing some shows to really hit hard that Olympia qualification, whether it might be 2021. That's what we're going to go for.
And when it comes to sort of repairing that metabolism, how long does it generally take you after a show to really get it back on track?
Um, the best practice, what I've heard and what I've kind of learned, is that however long it took you uh, to diet, so if you did a 30-week cut, and then you need to take that amount of time to reverse back out. Yeah, yeah. And I don't think a lot of people do that. They just want to hop right back into competing. And I understand that. You want to get those qualifications, while you can. But I think for me specifically, if I really want to hit it home, this is going to be important.
Yeah, well, definitely, yeah. You can never overdo getting that metabolism back because that's a really important thing that, especially health wise. But going off that, now we go on to a fun question. What was your go-to post-show meal for these last couple shows?
All right. Let me see. Because I had some cravings this time. Um, but I always, I always craves like pastries and donuts, hands down. Um, we actually, for Christmas, I went to Nashville, Tennessee, and they have a famous donut place called Five Daughters Bakery. And they're these 100-layer croissant donuts, and they're like filled and stuffed. And I was just in heaven. I was a happy girl after that. But usually after the shows, you're getting out pretty late. So it's like you have to find a restaurant, that's open. You want to do something festive. So usually the real treats that you're trying to hit come like the next day, um, when you can go get them.
Yeah. I mean, I always said I would just rent out a Five Guys with like $1,000 and just say, "Here, I'm buying you out for the night. You're just going to feed me until I either puke, pass out, or throw up. But either way, I'm going to get my money's worth." But if someone were to walk up to you and say, "Hey, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding," and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
I would like to see more women head judges, more women. I think, and I could be wrong. I think there's only one woman head judge in the entire IFBB, and I just think that women also have a key eye for detail and things like that. So I think that would be cool.
I don't get why for women there aren't just women judges. I don't get that because it's like, how could a man know what it took for a woman to go on stage and like vice versa? Like, I don't get that, honestly. That's something, yeah. I honestly don't understand that because yeah, it's just so different. But yeah, I would say that too. I mean, one complaint that we hear all the time, and I like to use this as an example. I mean, if you were to compete in shows in back-to-back weekends, one week they might want you a little bit more of a fuller look. The next weekend they might want you a little bit more of a shredded look, and it's like good luck changing over that one week if you really want to play as well. So just have a little bit more parity in the judging. But yeah, I honestly was not aware that there's that much lack of female judges. So I'd highly say to the IFBB, yeah, they definitely got to get their crap together when it comes to that. But also, I mean, we are 3 days out of New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, I should say, where I mean, the gym is just going to be flooded with New Year's resolutioners. I mean, I bet this is like a hell week for you coaches and you trainers when it comes to just getting a new bunch of people. But the sad thing that I always think of when I think about New Year's resolutioners is that there's such a small, minuscule percentage of them that actually follow through with their goals. Excuse me, and actually accomplish it. I mean, it's got to be like in the 10 to 20 percentage. And what advice do you have for people who are just starting out on their New Year's resolution or just starting in the gym so that they can maintain that? Because so many people just go in way too hard and they just burn themselves out and they last maybe by the end of February. You usually see it's very very quiet in the gym then.
Yeah, and I think that's just it is not going overboard day one. Keep it really realistic, set some realistic goals, even if they're super small. Like, hey, I had a protein shake today. Or, hey, I stepped foot in a gym today. I don't know if it was productive, but I got there. Don't do things that you're actually going to follow through on. And not just make these giant goals that you're going to set the expectation up here and you're never going to make it. And then you'll fall short. And then that's just kind of the perpetual cycle of failing and not keeping those promises to yourself.
Yeah. One also, if I could ever give my own piece, it would be if you really need it, go with a friend too, because it's better to have that extra intrinsic motivation. Now, I'm one of those people where it's like, just stay out of my way when I'm in the gym. I don't want anyone near me. But that's just because that's my time to let loose a little bit and just recover from my day and just yeah. So I'm one of those people. But yeah, I had a roommate in college who was just like, hey, let's make a workout plan together and we can go together. And I was like, I like you, but I'm like, no, I'm sorry. But yeah, so that didn't work out. But no, and again, just like everyone else has their different things when going on into the gym. But what would you say is probably the biggest misconception that you get from people about when they think about female bodybuilding?
Um, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Um, let's see. Besides being too bulky, um, I think most people look at women who do bodybuilding um, as people who kind of starve themselves or um, they maybe don't see the value in it or the intention behind why we do what we do. And again, that's going to be individual between person to person. I know when I first started, especially, the people who love you and care about you, they don't understand why you're doing it. They think you have this intention to seek attention or, you know, just to, I don't know, do something with ill will. But bodybuilding is a very taboo sport. And if you've never been to a bodybuilding show or you've never kind of been introduced into that industry and you go to one, it's kind of funny. Like it's kind of different. You don't understand it. I remember the first bodybuilding show I ever went to. I was just like, whoa, like everyone's just jacked and shredded and they're posing on stage and they're so into it. And I was like, I love it though. Like I kind of love it. But I can definitely see where people outside of it can, have a lot of preconceived notions or judgments before they before they know what it's all about.
Oh, it's just like everything in life though. If you aren't aware of it, and if you aren't, I mean, it's just human nature to sort of be like, "Oh, what," just to be a little on edge about it. But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I've never been to a show myself, but it's just watching it on stage. I mean, yeah, it's not like any other sport that's out there. That's I think that's just what differentiates it so much more. And like you said too, I mean, the funny thing when you said like people just think that you guys starved yourselves, those are usually the same people that also watch a Victoria's Secret show and look at the models and say, "Oh my God, I want to look just like them. They look amazing."
Hmm.
They're doing probably even worse than bodybuilders do when it comes to just retaining. And I mean, I just find that so funny. To It's sort of like it's just, I mean, it's a funny, it's a contra, it's ironic. That's what I was thinking of. That's what I was trying to say. When it comes to that, but yeah, I mean, I cannot stress enough just how I love having the bodybuilders come on and explain their journeys, because it isn't explained too much. I mean, you don't hear that much, especially on Instagram where it's just a lot of photos. People don't understand the journey that goes along with it. So, I mean, just to bring any bit of understanding to that. But is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Um, there's a lot of people I would give a shout out to. I think just I always go back to kind of like my first ever mentor that kind of planted the seed of me doing bodybuilding at the very beginning. Um, I don't know if I would have gone into it if someone didn't nudge me, because I didn't see myself in that light. I didn't see my own potential. You're kind of blinded to how others perceive you. So it was almost like he was just this, divine mentor that kind of planted this seed that I ended up following through on, and just it kind of became a part of me now, and I ended up being pretty successful with it. So I'm always just so grateful for that, because I didn't ask for that. I don't know, it was just something that kind of came in out of the blue. So shout out to him.
Well, and I want you to be completely honest. What was your first impression of bodybuilding when you first heard of it? What went through your mind when someone first mentioned bodybuilding to you?
Well, bodybuilding, like I've always kind of been I've always knew what it was, but when I first um, saw women's bikini, I fell in love with it. I honest to God fell in love with it. I didn't know that there was a division specifically for bikini, because when you think bodybuilding, you think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman, you think of the men and their division. But when I first found out about women's bodybuilding, specifically the bikini division, I fell in love with it. Like fire was like lit right away. And I just had to try it out for myself.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And if people are interested in contacting you for coaching or to just with your team, other than Instagram, where can they find you?
They can email me, Teresa@biolane.com.
All right. I'll leave that down below and also put it on the screen right here. And again, Theresa, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast and sharing, giving us an update, and love to have you on again in a year from now. And God, I mean, I don't know if I don't know if you're the same too, but just being in the 2020s now is really starting to creep me out, because you watch all those science fiction movies where it's taking place in the future and it's the 2020s. I don't know. This is really just fascinating. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So again, you guys, Theresa, we cannot thank her enough. And everyone, go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to all of her stuff down below. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.